All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Shawn here at Zyxel. I am going to be your presenter today. Give me just 1 second. All right. So I manage our wireless products. I also manage Nebula, and today we're going to be talking about Nebula and just sort of going through some of the features that are often overlooked or misunderstood, or things that maybe you want to know or that you should set that people maybe get wrong a few times. So a little bit of best practices, a little bit tips and tricks. As we go through today, feel free to send in questions. I usually would tell you to use the question and answer interface in Zoom, but Zoom has redone the interface, and now both chat and question and answer are just as hard to see as each other. So use either or. Do not raise your hands. I cannot give you the ability to talk. So if you have a question, send it in using the chat or using question and answer, and I will see one of the two. Depending on what the question is, I will answer it either right then or I will hold off until the end of today's presentation. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started talking about Nebula. Yeah, let's see if I can turn one thing off here. There we go. So when you first start setting up Nebula, we have two things in there. We have organizations and we have sites. And this often causes a little bit of confusion if you're new to Nebula. So basically, an organization is going to be your customer. So if you have multiple customers that you're managing, you're going to want to set them up into their own organization, and then you can have multiple sites under that organization. So, for instance, if you have a customer who's got a chain of Subway restaurants, you're probably going to want to, create a organization for that guy, and then create individual sites for each location that they are operating. When it comes to Nebula licensing, we have Plus and ProPack, and that's done on an org basis. So every device in that org needs to have a license in order to enable those features. An organization can only have one owner, and an organization can have an unlimited number of sites under it. Then we've got our interface here. So once you're in Nebula and on one of the dashboards or configuration screens, up at the top, we've got this drop-down menu for you. So it makes it really easy to jump between customers by using the org pull down, and then sites using the site pull down. So really quick to jump between those. So one thing, what you may do a little bit differently here is if you've got a customer with a lot of sites, you may want to create multiple orgs for them. One of those reasons is just to make it easier to find the individual sites. You may want to set them up based on, you know, physical location, or based on the type of sites, warehouse versus an admin office versus a sales office. Um, and then when it comes to those Plus and Pro Pack features, like I was saying, that is done on an organization basis. So another idea you may have here is you may have one customer and one site, but you may want to split them into multiple orgs and multiple sites to reduce the number of licenses that you need to have. So for instance, maybe you want to have access to the advanced IGMP features on the switches, which requires a Pro Pack license. But you don't need the Pro Pack features for your access points or gateway. So you may create one org for those devices that need the Pro Pack features, and then another org in site for those devices that are just fine using the free version of Nebula. So it's a way to get around some of those things. Now, obviously, you have to think about that and what those features are, because if there's interactions between the devices, it may not work if they're on different sites, but oftentimes it does. So if you've got a large customer with a lot of sites, we do have a bulk site creation tool that's available as part of the setup wizard. So it often gets overlooked. So it's a little hidden tab when it prompts you to create a new site, where you can create multiple sites. So you can choose to create those just using the default, bare bones Nebula configuration, but you can also clone existing sites that are underneath that organization. Um, and if you are using ProPack, you can use templates to create those sites. So that way you can create a bunch of sites in advance. Um, so it's good if you're setting up a new customer and they've got a lot of sites, but it also may be good for management reasons. So whoever the main admin is, he can create a bunch of blank sites to begin with, and that way other admins and installers can go through and take advantage of those sites without having to create something new themselves later on down the road. Which leads us to here, Nebula administrators. We've got lots of different types and levels of administrators. And this is also another area where there is some confusion. So when it comes to Nebula, each organization with the free version of Nebula can have 5 different admin accounts. If you're using Plus Pack, I believe that jumps up to 10. And then if you're using Pro Pack, it's an unlimited number of admins per org. So again, that's a per org level. So each one of your customers, you can have 5 different admins set up for that customer. So we've got a couple different tiers of service. So we'll start by talking about the organization level, right? So again, an organization may have several different sites, and we've got 4 different options that are available for the level of that admin user. So whoever first creates an organization is the owner. Um, so an organization can only have one owner at any time, and only the organization owner may transfer ownership of that organization to another user. And the reason I am bringing this up, because something that often happens out there is you've got a couple different admins or tech guys that you're using, and each one of them are creating their own orgs when they're setting up a new customer, and then that person leaves the company. And now you no longer have ownership of that organization. Um, so that's something there that generally what you're going to do is you're going to have one person in your company, and they're going to be responsible for creating organizations. So somebody who's not going to leave, somebody that's going to be around for a while. To make sure you don't lose access to some of your sites. Now, you can create lots of organizations in advance and just leave them blank. And then that way, your other admins who are actually handling the configuration and setup of those orgs, you just tell them, use blank 105. They go to that, and that can always then be renamed to indicate who the customer is down the road. Ownership is the only owner is the only also the only one who's allowed to transfer licenses to and from an organization. The next level is full. So this is what most of your techs are probably going to have. This gives them full access to all sites under that organization. And you can select the checkbox that delegates owner authority to those users. So basically, it gives them full access to all settings on all of the on that organization and all of the sites under that organization. But these still, even with ownership authority, cannot delete organizations, cannot transfer ownership, or transfer ownership authority to other admins. Only the owner can do that. Now, if you've got some admins or you've got some end users who've got some employees that need access to Nebula, there are 2 levels after that that you would use for them if you're only giving them access to certain sites. The first is at the org level, you give them read-only access. They can see all of the sites. They cannot configure any of the sites. The other level here is none. So by default, they have access to none of the sites. Now, when you create a new admin at a read-only or none level, you will be prompted then to set access at a site level. So this is where you're going to give them access to the sites that they can configure. So you can give them full access to the site to make configuration changes. You can give them read-only access to individual sites. You can give them monitor access. So how is monitor access different than read-only? So with read-only, you can go into all of the configuration screens and you can see all of the details that have been put in there. With monitor only, you can log in and you can only see the monitoring pages. So only those pages that show you what's going on in the network, such as the dashboard and some of the report pages. You will not be able to see the configuration pages. We have another level, which is really handy here for people, called the installer level. So if you're using contracted third parties to go on site and install the actual hardware, this is the level you would give them. It allows them to install the app. It allows them to use the app then to scan QR codes, assign devices to a site, and pretty much only that. So they can see the dashboard, they can add devices, they can go into the device detail page, they can put it on a map using our map integration. They can take a photo of the device and store it. But that's pretty much all they can do. Now they can also remove Nebula devices as well. So they can add and remove. And one of the nice features we have when it comes to creating admin accounts is we do have the ability to automatically disable the account after a certain date. So if you've got, third-party installers, they're going to be done doing whatever it is they need to do at the end of February, you can automatically have it remove their access after the end of February. So you don't have to remember to go back in and manually remove those guys, and you don't accidentally leave them with access to your customer site. The other level we have here is called guest ambassador. So this is for sites where they're doing a public or guest hotspot access, and you want the somebody at the front desk or at the cash register to be able to provide voucher codes, which have the guest SSID on it, the guest password, and are limited to certain periods of time. So whoever has the guest ambassador level, the only thing they have access to is the ability to add or remove and change hotspot accounts or hotspot voucher codes. So that's who you would give that access to. They can't see any other settings on the individual site. So setting admin access is something that's pretty easy to do. You go into the admin management page there and you click create a new administrator. So as you can see there, you'll be prompted to enter a name, an email address for them, and then that's where you're going to choose organization level access and whether or not to activate that account. So if you activate the account, it's automatically live. If they already have a Nebula account, they'll be able to then see that organization. If you choose no, they will be sent an email and they will need to click a link on the email either to finish setting up their account if they don't have one, or if they already have an account, just to grant them that access to that or site. So if you set organization access to none, it is automatically going to prompt you to add at least one site. So there's a drop-down menu that lists all the sites that are underneath that organization. You choose that, then you'll choose which level of access you want them to have. And if you want them to have access to multiple sites, you would then, after you do the first one, you just click the add button here, and it'll automatically prompt you to add a second and a third, etc. So transferring ownership, something that happens a lot out there, either because one of your techs created the organization, or just because somebody's left the company, or you're no longer managing that, you've sold the account to another VAR out there. It's pretty easy to do. You just go into the administrators page. Whoever the new admin is going to need to be set up automatically, or going to need to be set up as an administrator first if they are not already an administrator. So you just go to organization wide, configure admins, click the add button, enter in the information that we just went over, set them up, and they are an admin. Save that, and then once you've saved that, you can use the checkbox next to their name, select that, and then select change owner. You'll just be prompted to make sure that is something you want to do, and you need to acknowledge that you understand that once you transfer ownership, you are no longer the owner. You no longer have any of that control. It belongs to that new account. You click yes, and it's done automatically. Now you can transfer devices and licenses between organizations. So maybe you added 10 APs to an organization. Turns out you only needed 8, so you want to transfer 2 either back to a holding org that you've set up for your excess inventory, or to another one of your customers' organizations or sites. It's really easy to do. Again, you go to organization wide in the menu, licenses and inventory, and then choose devices if you're transferring a device, or licenses if you're transferring licenses. It's pretty straightforward. You simply go through, check the devices that you want to be able to transfer, go up to the action menu, and you can see you've got the option there to change the organization it's assigned to, change the site it's assigned to, simply remove it, or in the case of licenses, transfer the licenses. So it'll pop up just making sure that's what you want to do. You'll choose which organization or site with the drop-down menu you want to transfer it to. You've got a checkbox here to keep the device interface settings as they are currently configured or not. And then that's all you need to do. And then you activate that and it will transfer it for you. And it's the exact same process using licenses. So when it comes to Plus or Pro Pack, there's a little bit of confusion on that. So again, if you want to do it, it is done at an org level. So every device at every site in that organization needs to have a valid license, or else the organization will not allow you to activate those Plus or Pro Pack features. So you can't just buy it for those devices. You want the Pro Pack features, it's every device in that organization. Once you have gone ahead and assigned licenses to all of the devices, you do need to then upgrade them to activate Pro Pack or Plus Pack. It does not happen automatically, and this is an area where there's always a little bit of confusion. So people have assigned the licenses, you think you're ready to go, but you do need to actually activate those licenses before the site will convert over. So to see that, you just, again, go to organization-wide licenses and inventory, and on the overview tab, it will show you the organization's current status. Base pack is the free version, Plus or Pro Pack. So if it still says Base Pack and you've already assigned all the licenses that you need, what you then need to do is click the upgrade button over on the right-hand part of that tab. And it will then prompt you to confirm that you do want to activate those licenses, and it will activate the licenses and automatically convert the org over to a Plus or Pro org. If you do not have licenses assigned to every device, this button will not show up. So then you will have the ability to go into the licenses tab or the devices tab and check to see which devices currently do not have a license, a valid license assigned to them. Now, another thing we do in Nebula is we give you 30-day free trials of just about everything. Pro Pack, MSP Pack, Plus Pack, our various different security licenses if you're using our gateways, etc. So you simply, again, go into organization-wide licenses and inventory and select the trial tab. If you've already activated a trial, it will show you how many days are left on that trial. Otherwise, there's this nice green activate button you hit, and it will automatically activate those trials for you. One of the key things here which causes some confusion, and this is, I blame us for this, it's a poor design choice that I have not been able to get them to change, and that is when you are using the Pro trial, so you've got Pro features activated, the interface will continue to show you're using the free version of Nebula. So you will always see this banner across the top of the page saying that the organization is using Base Pack. And if you go to the license and inventory overview tab, it will show you that it is Base Pack. So if you want to confirm that the trial is currently active or how many days are left in it, you then switch over to the trial tab and it will show you that the trial is in progress and what the expiration date is. So even though there's a banner at the top of the page saying you're using the free version of Nebula, the Pro Pack features have been unlocked and are accessible to you through the date listed under expiration date. So another thing that gets overlooked a lot is hardware locking. So with hardware locking, basically with Nebula, most people using this have lots of customers, they have lots of inventory, and it's a very common issue where, you know, your customer reports a problem with one of the devices. Rather than troubleshooting it offline, a lot of our customers will simply go and replace the hardware on site with a new piece of hardware and then take the possibly defective unit back to the lab for testing. So a feature request that was asked for early in the early days of Nebula was basically to make this simpler and easier to do. So by default, with Nebula these days, it is assumed that if you have access to the device QR code, you have access to the hardware. So if you scan that QR code that's on the belly label of the product using the Nebula app, or you scan the one that's on the outside of the box, it's assumed that you have access to that device and you have the ability to then change it and move it to another org or site. So basically, if you have access to the hardware, it assumes you are the owner. So it makes it simple and easy for you to quickly and easily go out there and swap out hardware, move hardware to your testing org, whatever it is that you happen to need. This can be disabled. So we have had problems where you're an MSP and the end user has gone out, scanned the QR code, and assigned the device to their own Oregon site that they've set up. And then the device becomes unresponsive because they don't know how to configure it to make it work with what you've got there, etc. So to turn this feature off, you just go into the organization settings, and there is the option, a checkbox there to turn off that device overship override. And this has to be done on a per org basis. So if you're one of the customers that wants to leave this there to make it easy for your techs to easily swap in and out hardware, leave it off. If you're somebody who just doesn't want that to ever happen, turn that feature on so it cannot be taken over and transferred other than through the Nebula interface itself. So we added a new feature a little while back. I think it was June or July, this last summer, that allows you to do alert aggregation. So one of the problems we have is you've got it set up to let you know when a device goes offline, so something's misbehaving. The challenge is what happens is the internet connection goes down. Spectrum has a service outage, somebody cuts the fiber going to the building, and now you've got 25 devices that have gone offline. So in the early days of Nebula, and the default behavior in Nebula is you will get 25 alerts for those 25 devices, or if it's 30 devices, 30 alerts. So it can be really a pain and make your phone really noisy and unresponsive for a little bit. So we have added alert aggregation. So you can go there, and when multiple devices go offline or have some other alert setting that you have set for them, instead of sending you one for each device, it sends you one notification and that tells you how many devices are experiencing the exact same thing. So I highly suggest turn this on. Go to the site-wide settings, configure alert settings, and enable alert aggregation. So again, instead of getting an individual notification for every device, you get one notification telling you how many devices in what site are experiencing an issue. Another area that causes some confusion in Nebula is there are two different ways to do static DHCP. So static DHCP still uses DHCP to assign an IP address to a device, but it locks it in so that device always gets the same IP address. So this is one of the most popular ways of doing static IPs in most organizations. But there's two different ways to do it in Nebula. So it can get confusing as to which one you need to use, or even to be aware that there are two different versions. So the easiest way to do it is you simply go to the client page. It shows you a list of all of the client devices that are connected to that network. There's a little checkbox near each. You select the checkboxes near the ones that you want to change, and then you go into the actions button here and you choose reserve an IP address. And from that point forward, that device will always get that same IP address it has. So it's a really easy, quick, simple way of being able to lock in an IP address for a device. The downside of it is it doesn't let you specify what that address is. It's just going to be whichever IP address that device currently has. So if you want to set individual specific IP addresses, instead of using the client page, you go to the interface page for the Zyxel router and go to the static DHCP table. So this is going to let you manually reserve a IP address on a per device basis. So you type in the device or the IP address, and here's where it gets challenging. You also have to type in the MAC address for that device. So you may need to have two tabs open. One tab open with the client page, which will show you the MAC addresses of each device. And then you'll need to copy and paste that into the interface page if you want to give them very specific IP addresses. And then if you've done it in both pages, the interface page will override the settings on the client page. Next up is cloud management. Obviously, these are managed by the cloud, so the devices do need to have the ability to reach out to the internet in order to be able to be managed. So these are the ports that you need to allow devices to send traffic outbound on. You don't need to open these up for unsolicited inbound traffic, but outbound traffic does need to be allowed on these ports. So for the netconf protocol that we use to communicate with the cloud, TCP 6667 and 4335 need to be allowed. For HTTPS, you do need to allow TCP port 443. If our devices do not have access to an accurate time server, they will lose the ability to communicate with the cloud due to encryption reasons. So you do need to allow UDP port 123 outbound. And then if you're using our VPN services, you do need to allow UDP 4500 and UDP 500 out. So on most networks, this all works just by default. There's nothing you need to do. But if you've got one of those really tight security networks that you run where they don't want anything going out without permission, these ports do need to be opened up for that outbound traffic. When it comes to access point power output, we've gotten a lot of questions over the years, so I wanted to talk about that briefly. Power output setting that you see in the Nebula interface is the maximum theoretical power that the device can broadcast. So some APs are not capable of broadcasting at those levels. So they'll just hit whatever the max is for that device. So you set it to 30, but the device can only hit 25. It'll be broadcasting at 25. So that's one reason you may see a difference between what you've set here and what you see on the monitoring pages where it shows you the current output power of the access point. When it comes to 5 and 6 gigahertz channels, some channels have FCC caps that limit the output power based on the channel you're using. So that's another reason you may see a lower output being broadcast than what you have set here. And then lastly, our 6E products. At least in the past, I have not confirmed if this is still an ongoing issue, but the 6E products were incorrectly reporting their power output on the 6 gigahertz radio due to a chipset driver issue. And I don't know if that chipset driver issue ever got solved. Multiple SSIDs. So as a general rule, if you're running multiple SSIDs, the reason you are doing that is because you have different types of users that need different network access. So each SSID should be on a different VLAN. We also have a feature here for those of you doing guest access on certain SSIDs, is we have the ability on our APs to be able to put NAT, not being done by the router, but NAT being done by the access point on a per SSID basis. So this allows you to put, for instance, your guest users on a different subnet than the rest of your users on the network. It's not 100% isolation, but it does give you greater isolation between those guest users and the rest of that network that you have. Now, if you're trying to run a guest network and you don't have VLAN aware infrastructure, we do have a feature called layer 2 isolation and intra BSS blocking. So this will block which devices the wireless users can send traffic to. So in general, you just put in the MAC address of the WAN port on your gateway, and they can only access the internet. They will not be able to send traffic to other wireless users. They will not be able to send traffic to your employees' computers or other devices on the network. Now, one trick with this is that it doesn't stop multicast traffic from coming from your network devices to the wireless users. So if they run a scanning tool, they will be able to see the IP addresses and some other information that's being sent by multicast by devices on your network. Now, they will not be able to reply to those broadcasts. They will not be able to access those devices, but they will be able to be seen using a network scanner. So that's something to keep in mind. So, one thing that our tech support has asked that we include in here is to take advantage of the channel utilization features on the monitoring page when it comes to the wireless LAN access point and troubleshooting issues. It's a very common problem where the issues that you're experiencing on wireless have to do with basically too many devices using the channel that AP is currently using, and it getting overwhelmed. So that's one of the first things you should check if you have wireless users complaining about the quality of their wireless connection. Wireless roaming. So this is a common area of confusion on wireless networks. Basically, according to the Wi-Fi standards, the client device is who manages roaming, not the access points, not your network. Um, So it's the client that decides when to disconnect from the current AP and connect to a better AP. Um, and each individual device vendor has a different algorithm that determines when to do this. Apple products in particular have a long history of being really sticky and refusing to change devices or access points that they're connected to, even when the signal is garbage. So there have been some features that are supposed to assist with it and make roaming quicker and better. Those are 802.11K and V. So you do want to enable those under assisted roaming if you're doing a large network. It doesn't always help, but in theory, this offloads some of that roaming behavior to the access point, so the access point can tell the client device it needs to maybe roam. Again, it just depends on the individual client device and the software they're running, whether they pay attention to that information or not. There's also 802.11R, which helps with fast roaming, so reducing the amount of time it takes when the device does decide to switch access points. So the workaround for this, you've enabled 802.11K and R, and you've still got people with MacBooks that are having problems, changing the SSID they're connected to as they roam around their house or their office. So one of the ways to do that is using something called smart steering. So with smart steering, the access point monitors the signal strength coming from the client device. And if it drops below a certain signal strength, it then disconnects the client and blocks them from reconnecting for a very short period of time. And in many cases, that will prompt the client device to rescan the wireless network and then associate with a closer access point to it, assuming there is one. So you just turn that on under configure access points radio settings, and then you will be prompted to choose at what signal strength to disconnect those users. By default, it is set to a signal strength of -70, and you will need to play with it based on the types of client devices, based on the internet, or excuse me, the environment you're operating in, what those levels should be to make the network, kick off those users that need to be kicked off, but also not start kicking off users that, need to stay on. So you just have to sort of play with that. Our sales engineer suggests the following settings here: 2.4 gigahertz, -69, 5 gigahertz clients, -72, 6 gigahertz clients, -75. So that's where he suggests you start rather than the -70 that's there by default. So another feature that tends to get overlooked is we have the ability on our switches to automatically place devices on specific VLANs based on what's called the OUI, or basically the first 6 digits of a device's IP, or excuse me, MAC address. So as a general rule, the most common use of this is a voice VLAN for voice over IP devices. So generally in an office, you're only going to have one or two vendors of VoIP phones, and most of those devices will have the same OUI. So you simply place that OUI in the Nebula interface, and it will automatically put those devices on the assigned VLAN that you have set up for your voice LAN. So it's a really handy feature to use rather than doing port-based VLAN or manually configuring each individual port. Just have a Nebula do it automatically for you. So to use this for voice VLAN, you go into the voice VLAN settings, you enable it, you configure what you want your voice VLAN ID to be and what priority on the network. choose Assign by OUI, and we will pull up a menu here where we have all of the most common voice over IP vendors and devices. We will have the OUIs for all of them, so you can simply go through and from the dropdown and choose each one that you need to use. So that's going through the voice VLAN menu. We also have the ability to do it through just a simple vendor ID based VLAN. So you can have two of these set up, one for your voice VLAN, one for some other type of device. And in this case, it's a similar interface, but you need to manually type the OUI in yourself. Since this could be any type of device, we don't know which OUI this should be. Richard just sent in a question asking if this is being recorded. So yes, this is being recorded. It will show up on our YouTube probably by tomorrow afternoon, if not sooner. It is, I have done this one before with similar information, so that one should already be on our YouTube, so you could probably find it there. But yes, it will be there for you. Next up here for us is storm control. So this is something we suggest you turn on. Um, but we suggest you change the default settings. So this generates a lot of calls to our tech support because the default setting is too sensitive, and people will see all these logs in the log file saying a broadcast storm was detected on certain devices. Um, so we suggest that you go in and change the settings to something that's higher here. So our sales engineer suggests at least changing the limit here from 100 to 200 and possibly up to 300. So what's basically happened here is Storm Control looks for a device creating a bunch of packets and wants to warn you that, hey, there's a device creating lots of packets. Maybe that means there's an infected device on your network, because that was common behavior of a lot of different worms and viruses that try to spread on the local network, or that try to do a DDoS on the local network. The challenge is that over the years, websites have gotten more complex, and simply opening a single web page can generate more than 100 packets. Facebook is a good example of this. Facebook can easily generate 170, 180 different requests to all the different servers that are serving images, servers that are serving ads, ad tracking, video embeds, all that type of stuff that goes into a Facebook page. So it can easily trigger a broadcast storm patrol alert in your logs just by opening up a single Facebook page. So bump that up to 200 or 300. And it will still let you know if there's something creating a lot of packets, but it will get rid of a lot of those false positives. We're getting here close to the end, guys. One of the last things I wanted to talk about here is Zyxel's AI chat. So this is something that, again, was added in the last year or so to Nebula, and I find it very, very helpful. So when you're navigating Nebula through the web browser, there's almost always this icon on the bottom right for doing chat. So chat is really good, in my opinion, for finding things you want to know more about. Right. So earlier today, I was talking about the differences between doing different ways of doing static DHCP. So I it's AI, and he suggests you talk to it, like Chat GPT or something. I do not. Just type in the bare basics of what you're looking for. I find that gets you the best results. So for instance, in this case, I want to learn more about static DHCP. Simply type in static DHCP, and Nebula will give you this chat response, which may or may not be helpful. I generally skip this and go straight to the bottom where the AI tells you where it found the information. So basically, the AI searches all of our documents and then tries to create a summary for you. The formatting is bad, and oftentimes these summaries aren't the greatest. I'm sure anybody who's used Gemini or ChatGPT has learned that these summary AIs still have a long ways to go. But the sources are where the real information is. So that's how I like to use it. Type in the feature that I'm trying to learn about, or type in the setting, that I'm not sure what I should do. it'll give you that summary, but then it will give you sources that you can click through to find the actual documentation that explains those features. So I find this very, very helpful when I'm messing around in Nebula and I'm stumped on something, or I'm wanting to, try to figure out what a certain feature does or means because it's not something I've used before. AI chat, type in the basic words, go direct to the sources that it pops up. And with that, we are done. So again, if you have any questions, send them in through the Q&A or chat right now, as well as suggestions for maybe topics or things as part of Nebula that you'd like to see me add to future tips and tricks webinars here. Many of these topics on here were explicitly requested by you, so that helps us figure out, what's stumping you, what's causing you issues, what's made you call our tech support when you didn't want to. So I can try to add those to future ones. In addition, my email's up there, so you can always just email it to me, Shawn R. So Shawn is spelled SHAWN, then the letter R at Zyxel.com. Or you can always pass this feedback on to your sales guy. So Andy, David, Jacob, and ask them to pass it on to me. If a day or two down the road, you think, hey, you know what, I'm stumped on something in Nebula. Shawn should probably add that to his webinar. Just pass it to your sales guy, ask them to do that, and I will at least consider adding it to the webinar. So please send those in, give me some ideas. So Richard has a question, and it is one I do not know the answer to. So are Nebula switches close to having their full feature set in Nebula? So I think the answer to that is it's pretty similar between the two. I don't know it's 100%, but as far as I'm aware, it's a very close between the two. Now, some of the features that are available in the standalone mode do require a Pro Pack if you're using Nebula. So basically, the features are free if you're using it in standalone mode, but you do need Pro Pack if you're using it in Nebula to get access to those features. Those features, specifically the ones that I am aware of off the top of my head, are the advanced IGMP settings. And then if you are using the 1350 series of switches, those are our special switches for the IP camera market. Some of those features, like the ability to monitor connected devices and automatically reboot them, do require the Pro Pack in order to get access to those. Now, having said all of that, I am not the switch guy. I don't spend a lot of time in messing with switches or doing any of the advanced stuff. So there may still be some features that are missing, but I'm under the impression that it's getting pretty close to being equal between the two. But if there's certain features you're looking for, Try is the guy to ask. So if you don't have Try's email, just reach out to your salesperson specifically with those questions. And then we can look it up on the roadmap and see if those are on the roadmap to be added and when they are going to be there. So hope that helps. Probably not exactly what you were looking for, but that's the best I can do. I'll also just throw in here while we're talking about it, the USG Flex H series. So for those of you who don't know, the H series is our new, going to be soon, replacement for the USG Flex. And basically it's a new hardware platform that's faster, and it's a new software platform that's faster. And unfortunately, many of the features that are part of Nebula on the USG Flex are still missing from the USG Flex H series in Nebula. It's taking longer than we thought to port those features into the Nebula interface. So we did just have an update that added a lot of features into Nebula, but the full feature set is now currently targeting April of this year for parity between the USG Flex and the USG Flex H series in Nebula. So something else to keep an eye on. Hopefully it won't get delayed any further. We're definitely, I think there's going to be some additional features added here in January, but again, April is when everything is supposed to finally hit parity between the two versions. With that, there are no more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you do have something, again, my email's up there, or just reach out to your sales guy and pass it on, and they'll pass it on to me. Thank you for joining us today. I hope I see you at one of our future webinars.